So the first one is I want to take on this idea of the workplace is a vehicle for societal change. Okay? So if you think about that, what should be the role of the workplace? What should be the role of companies in that way, if we look at it that way? Or do you even believe in that?
Well, I do believe in that. I think that's an interesting question to ask. I personally, when I first heard this, that was kind of the approach I was taking, where it's like, why would the workplace be so separate from everything else? Shouldn't you be able to have political conversations and be able to have them well? Shouldn't you be able to talk to your coworkers about things that are happening outside of work that you feel passionately about? And so I think that if we're looking at a workplace as a reflection of society, those conversations should happen. But I think when you look at the way that they're happening, that's when it becomes an issue.
Okay, say more about that. Today's show is a little different than our normal show. So normally I would have a guest and we take on a topic and I ask that guest lots of questions about their topic, and whether it's emotional intelligence or listening or your career or having those conversations at work. This one is kind of about the conversations at work, but my lovely, amazing, wonderful daughter, Abby, is going to be joining me, and we're going to talk about Basecamp's decision to change some of their policies. And if you haven't been following the news around Basecamp, it's an interesting one because the most contentious item that they laid out there was they said no more political discourse or social activism discourse using our company resources on our company platform. We don't want to do that. And they went into some more things that they kind of outlined, all with the goal of kind of getting people more focused to work and focused on work. So we're going to talk about the role of company and the workplace, and whether we should be more on the promoting social advocacy or we should be more on the kind of purity of work and keeping focused on work. So Abby and I are going to have some great discussion on that and kind of give the pros and cons to both points. And hopefully you find it interesting for you and maybe even reaffirms some positions or thoughts you have. So enjoy the conversation and I hope you get something out of it.
The Workplace Therapist Show is sponsored by the Leadership Foundry. Bringing a cutting-edge, real-world approach to leadership development, the Leadership Foundry partners with each client organization to create a custom-tailored experience, virtual or in person, that combines innovative leadership content, world-class facilitators, and one-on-one coaching to ensure your leaders have everything they need to grow and thrive. To find out more and to design your one-of-a-kind program, visit myleadershipfoundry.com.
Abby, you're back on the show.
I am.
You're here again. How many times have you been on the show now?
This is my third.
Officially? We did the segment last year from home. Remember, does that one count?
Oh, yes. If that counts, then this is my fourth. I had forgotten about that. But yeah, that was like the big COVID senior finale episode.
That's right.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, we talked about COVID and what it was like for you finishing up your senior year in high school.
Yeah.
And now you finished up your freshman year in college.
Yeah.
Which, as you said, makes you so qualified to come on the show again and share things.
I've heard freshmen in college are the smartest.
Well, you're no longer a freshman anymore.
No, now I'm a sophomore.
Yeah. Rising sophomore? Is that what we say?
I guess.
I think that's something.
I think that's what they say.
Okay, so we got a topic today. And it's a fairly juicy topic, I think. It's a juicy topic. I think it's a contentious topic. It's all about the workplace, and we're going to kind of play off this a little bit. And we're going to see where we take this. So this has to do with Basecamp.
Yes.
So that's Basecamp's announcement that when they came out and said they posted internally on kind of new rules. And so just to summarize for folks who aren't familiar, the first, right out of the gate, their first new policy was no more societal and political discussions on our company Basecamp account. So they told employees, if you want to do that on your own private time, you can, but you can't use company time and resources to do social advocacy, basically. The second one was they said no more paternalistic benefits. So in other words, they're cutting out all their benefits of wellness allowance, farmers market share, continuing education allowances, all those things. But they're not just, their reasoning is whatever you do in your private time, it's not fair for us to be putting an opinionated slant on that.
Okay.
So they basically said, we're going to give everybody the cash value of what those benefits are. Use the cash any way you want.
Got it.
So if you'd rather just buy a bunch of ice cream and eat ice cream on the weekends, you can do that. You don't have to do a farmer's market if you don't want to. So then they said no more committees. They had started to get committees. They didn't like that, so they said no more committees. We're back to just letting people kind of make decisions. No more lingering on or dwelling on past decisions. So again, kind of more of this like forward momentum, make a decision, move on. No more 360 reviews. So they said they were having employees do 360 reviews of other employees. They said it wasn't really giving real feedback. People were just kind of saying nice things about each other, and it was kind of wasting time. And then number 6 was the last one, which was no forgetting what we do here. So really kind of focusing back on kind of the core of, we're here. So I sum up all that. If you look at those as a whole, you say they're really just trying to say we've been getting involved in lots of different things that are distracting us from what we're really supposed to be doing, which is our core business, and we really want people to just focus on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I think where it's gotten tension or contentious is the first one, where they said no political or societal advocacy, basically, on company time.
Yeah.
So it looks like you want to say something.
I do want to say something.
How could I tell?
Well, we only make the same faces, so I'm sure it wasn't that hard.
So what's your reaction to this? For sure, initial reaction.
So my first initial reaction is I see some really positive changes in there. And I feel like sometimes it's easy for companies to get really distracted in other things. I've worked at companies before where I felt like, for example, the committees. I felt like that's been problematic in workplaces that I've worked at before. So I see them taking that away as something maybe we don't need, something that is distracting. I could see that really being valuable. But like you said, the first one has really blown up. It's gone a little viral on Twitter. And I think it's a really interesting take, especially as we just finished a pretty intense election year. I think it really asked the question, what is the workplace for? And it's really, I think, kind of playing on what's the role of the workplace, and it's asking what's acceptable going forward in all workplaces, not just Basecamp.
I think it's a great question to ask. What's the workplace for? I think where it gets complicated is for Basecamp, they said, we're really focusing on just this core product. For some companies, they are so huge and they are so actively ingrained in society that they probably have a role or responsibility in getting involved in social issues. But that's not to say every company does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we so often want to be all companies are like this, or all workplaces should be like this. But I think it really depends. Who works at your workplace, and what does your workplace do? I think that's a great point. They've got a product that they really do need to come back and focus on. And I understand how for them, it's all about selling Basecamp to people. It's all about incorporating Basecamp into other workplaces. And I could see why they're this has nothing to do with political issues, and we need to take that out because it is a distraction. Yep. However, in other companies, they might have a huge role. That might be a part of their product, or that might be a part of what they're doing in the world. And so it's going to look different. And I think as the world gets more complex, so should company policies. Each company needs to...
Are you saying more policies?
No, I'm not saying more policies, but I'm saying different policies.
I think that's fair. So they made it in the post, he went in, it was very well written, I thought, but he mentioned in there, he's like, all of our sensitivities are dialed up to 11. And I think that's very true. So you and I are taking on this topic, and everyone listening right now has got an opinion on this.
Yeah.
And so everyone's sensitivities are dialed up to 11. So we're going to take two different perspectives.
Yeah.
We could argue they're opposing views, but we're going to say they're different perspectives on what it means to be at work and the workplace. So the first one is, I want to take on this idea of the workplace is a vehicle for societal change. Okay? So if you think about that, what should be the role of the workplace? What should be the role of companies in that way, if we look at it that way? Or do you even believe in that?
Well, I do believe in that. I think that's an interesting question to ask. I personally, when I first heard this, that was kind of the approach I was taking, where it's why would the workplace be so separate from everything else? Shouldn't you be able to have political conversations and be able to have them well? Shouldn't you be able to talk to your coworkers about things that are happening outside of work that you feel passionately about? And so I think that if we're looking at a workplace as a reflection of society, those conversations should happen. But I think when you look at the way that they're happening, that's when it becomes an issue.
Okay, say more about that.
Now you're asking me harder questions. I think that there's so much more emotion than ever behind political conversations. And I feel like it can lead to relationships being broken, more workplace therapy being needed, people not trusting each other, people feeling targeted, not understood. And that's hard to work with people when you feel like you guys are, when you see the world in such different ways, when you feel that way.
Yeah. So here's what I'm going to kind of build on what you said. I think, here's the parts where we like the idea of being able to have these kinds of conversations at work. We like being able to bring our whole self to work.
Exactly.
We like being known at work and being able to share parts of our life with our coworkers, things we're passionate about, things that are important to us, right? And we want to be known and respected. And so those are things everyone listening would say, yes, absolutely like that.
And I would like to say that you also like to know your coworkers, like you like to know those things about the people that you spend so much time with. Like you do spend 8 hours a day with these people. Like you like to know where they're coming from.
Yeah, and I think where this becomes challenging is two ways. One, there needs to be some skill in how these conversations are had, particularly if people feel very strongly about a particular view. And ironically enough, I've been preaching a lot about this because everyone now has their frickin' religion, right? I've got my COVID religion, I've got my political religion, I've got my religion, and it's so deeply ingrained that when they start to talk about it, it's not really about me wanting to understand you, it's about me wanting to change your belief to my religion, which then becomes contentious, right? And so, I want you to believe what I believe, and that becomes really, really hard to navigate, and that's hard.
I think we so often don't recognize that people have beliefs for so many reasons. There's not one reason why anyone believes something the way they do. I mean, it goes back to so many past experiences, so many past interactions, a background. Like you can't learn after 5 minutes of having a political discussion with someone. Like where someone grew up, what they were around, like all of those are factors that people just choose to ignore, and it's so easy to label someone as the bad guy.
Yeah, and I think there is a distinction between being known and understood versus advocate. Yeah. So advocating is, I want to change your view or change policy to something that I believe is right. And I'm not saying that person is right or wrong, but that's not about being known. No. I'm not changing me. I absolutely want to change you, or I want to change the world out there. Now, if your business is in social advocacy, then you should absolutely have committees and vehicles for doing this internally, because it's very consistent with your product and your position in the world. I absolutely think that's right. And that would be a case where you would say, yeah, absolutely, you should put this in place. Yeah. But it's consistent with your business. It's consistent with the culture you're trying to create. Yeah.
So a question for you. Do you think that companies can or should teach their employees how to have these conversations better? Like, should they do training for employees?
So I'm going to, I think that there's absolutely always room to have better conversations. So I do think there's training on how to have better conversations. But I want to pivot that to the second.
Yeah.
If we are going to go down that path, they have to train people how to have that better. But you'd only do that because it's fundamental to how we do work, our work. Like we're doing this because it's part of our business model. It's going to help us do our work better.
Yeah.
Right. And I've got clients that their product is part of kind of social change, is part of their culture and part of their brand. And so, absolutely, they have these conversations internally.
Yeah.
And they try and train and equip them to do that, and that's the right thing. So there's the company as the vehicle for advocacy and social change. And then there's more of the other view is more like the view of more the purity of work view, which is probably another just the best way to say that, which is just work is work. We're here to do a job, and we've got to be focused on doing this on our job. Just probably a little more of what Basecamp's position is. In which case, you have to ask yourself what's noise and what's focus for us.
So something I thought was interesting that made me a little bit critical of Basecamp's position was that they said that it's a distraction, which I don't disagree with. But I thought it was interesting that they were choosing to focus on this distraction versus so many other distractions that we face in workplaces.
That's fair.
I mean, having personal laptops, like that's filled with distraction. I've heard, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but there are crazy statistics about how much time is wasted on social media during the workday, Why are we not targeting those issues? And that's kind of why I was like, it made me a little uneasy that they were going for more of a freedom of speech component versus like get off Facebook at work, approach. Or even just like that. It kind of also begs the question, or leads to the question of how much should your workplace be able to control what you're doing at work? Because they specifically referenced like company time and property.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about that. So
Yeah.
I would say, I think the reason why they honed in on this one is because they're concerned that if that's promoted or allowed to happen, it's going to create division amongst the team members, right? Because while we're on the same team, all of a sudden you view this situation I view it this way, and then now all of a sudden we don't like each other.
Yeah, which would hurt company culture.
Yeah. So then now you're getting back into the very, very old school traditional. At work, you don't talk about sex, you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about politics. You kind of keep all that stuff away. Now, people don't naturally follow those rules, but that's always been the historical, old school way of work is work. You're a professional. Those kind of topics need to happen off work hours.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like the more purity of work, kind of old school approach, which has its merits too in certain ways. Because you are down to what are we really here for? What are we paid to do? Now, to your point, if you're using company resources in a company paid space, and you're being paid by the hour, they have a lot of say over what you do. Even the intellectual property that you create. If you use their resources, it's their property. So it's that part's tricky. People sometimes forget that.
Yeah.
And I think the other part that is really important to remind people is, when we talk, and I don't mean this to come across as, again, this is the view of the work as purity kind of view, to have committees that talk about social change, if it's not related to the work you're doing, it is a benefit the company provides you.
Yeah.
Because they're paying you during that time to have those conversations. You're not working on company things, and they're paying you to have those conversations. You wouldn't, hire a plumber to come over to your house, and you're paying them by the hour, and they say, well, before I get started, I want to sit down and spend an hour talking about my political views. You would say, no, this is a horrible plumber. Like, I don't want to hear your political views. Or you go to a restaurant, and the waiter or waitress sits down and says, before we get started, I've got some views on social change I really just need to share with you all. You'd say, but I'm really hungry. And so I think people forget that, they are a company of one, and the company that I'm serving is my customer, and I need to serve my customer really well. I think they treat it more as like, no, you need to provide me all these benefits and things, and they're your customer. And if you do really well, they're going to keep promoting you and pay you more money, and that's a good thing.
I think you're right. I think people so often have glamorized what the company can do for me instead of what they can do for their company, you know. And I think that Basecamp really is kind of taking that head on with these new policies, just kind of reestablishing, almost separating themselves a little bit. The company. I think they're trying to make it less messy, the relationship between the company and the employee.
Yeah.
And I see that, but then it's also kind of begs the question of like, what should the line be for all companies in a digital age too? Because I think another thing that they were getting a lot of criticism for was it almost implied that no political discussions on social media too. And should companies be able to dictate what their employees do online? Like, how much control should they have over that? Because if they're a reflection of the company, what does that mean?
So a lot of companies
look like?
they have social media policies, and that's right. And it's a gray area, and you have to make a decision, So I know of one company that had an employee, and after they hired this employee, pretty quickly, this employee has a large follower base, and they came right out the gate and said, and this was back when Donald Trump was president, we need to assassinate Donald Trump. Well, you're just now advocating for assassinating the president of the United States. That would probably not be a good stance for a company to back.
Yeah.
And the company had to make a decision. What do we do with this employee? In this case, I think they actually decided to keep the employee. But there's a line that no one really knows where it is. But,
exactly.
But it just, I think if we take that, so everyone has to make their own decision on how they want to operate and what they think is right. whether we decide that we want to make advocating for social change kind of every part of our life, and then you should find companies that support that. Or if you decide that, I really want to kind of keep that to my private life and keep my kind of public life kind of focused on my job, you make that decision too. But I think regardless, you got to recognize there's a lot of blurry lines.
Yeah.
You post stuff in your free time, people are going to read about it. I'll give you another good example. I had a client of mine several years ago, and she said she was Facebook friends with one of her direct reports. And she knows her direct report was just kind of making a lot of just upset, negative comments about elections and election cycles. And so then she started saying, I think the direct report's like not in a good place. I was going to promote her, but now I don't want to because she seems really stressed out.
Yeah.
So, we're kind of being watched in lots of areas, and we have to ask ourselves, what's that reflecting on us? So what do you think? Do you think your view is one that all your friends would hold? Would they hold different views? What perspective? Because I do find that the lines can vary generationally.
Yeah, I was actually about to bring up the same thing. Just how have you seen it vary generationally? For me, I feel like my generation, well, it's kind of interesting. I'm not a millennial, but I'm not a Gen Z. Really, I'm like right in between. They call it zillennials.
What is this called now?
A zillennial. It's like right in between.
Zillennial?
I think.
I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right because this is now your new nickname.
I know.
At dinner.
I hate this. I hate that I told you this. But
I can't wait to tell your brothers. Will you please call the zillennial down to dinner?
Okay. Thank you. But I think it's interesting because for me, I feel like knowing how heated the political space is, I would never make political comments at work or even just not with people I'm not comfortable with. However, like I understand everyone has different experiences and everyone has different views and everyone thinks that there's different approaches to sharing politics. So it really depends. But I'm still surprised that this is such a big issue because, they even referenced it when they made the rules. There are so many outlets to talk about politics and your political views and society and your societal views. So it does surprise me that so many people want to have these discussions at work.
Yeah. I've made a very conscious decision for me that I don't like to share those elements about me at work. Not because I'm concerned about how people react necessarily, but it's because I'm concerned that they won't hear my message that I'm trying to say because they're going to label me
a certain way. Yeah.
Immediately, whether I say I'm a hardcore Democrat or I'm a hardcore Republican or somewhere in between, people who are on the other side of that spectrum are going to say, oh, well, then he's not like me, and that I don't have anything to do with what he has to say. And what I'm trying to say is to help anybody. So I don't want to limit my ability to help people.
Exactly.
By having something block that. And
exactly.
That's my view.
Exactly. And maybe I feel the way that I feel because you're my dad and I've grown up around that. Like I can't say that I would feel this way if I had seen something different, but I agree with you. I have friends that are really outspoken about political beliefs, and I just feel like sometimes it actually, instead of allowing you to share more, I feel like it just makes people, it's just a turn off to some people. It makes people tune you out in a way that you don't want to be tuned out, in a way that's not fair to anyone. Instead of seeing someone for like a human with complex feelings and ideas, you're just kind of like, oh, they're that. And that's kind of the end of the conversation. So as someone who doesn't want that to happen, again, like it just surprises me that so many people are willing to have these really hot topic debates at work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I could see why a workplace would want to step in and stop that from happening and just, again, get back to work, and not make it a space where that's so easy to do.
Yeah.
However, it does also in some ways feel like an overstep.
Yeah.
I see both sides very clearly.
Yeah, it's hard. I'm not sure exactly what the right answer is, other than companies just have to really, I would say, look at the big picture. What's our place in society? How does it fit with our brand and what we're trying to do? And then make decisions based on that. And then you're going to attract, as in that Basecamp post, he said, some people aren't going to like this change, just like users when we make change to our technology, and then they leave. Yeah. And maybe that's okay.
Yeah.
So you're going to attract and you're going to repel folks that either agree or disagree with your view on work, what it means to be at work.
So do you think there's a way for companies to create cultures that make it kind of clear that political conversations aren't the goal, or aren't acceptable without setting a rule? Do you think, how could a company do that?
I think probably something similar to what they did. They said you can't use company resources for that because.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing is if you are going to take a stance, you have to clearly communicate why. Mm-hmm. You have to say it's not because we're preventing you from your political views or that we're not supporting what you might believe.
Yeah.
Or supporting the kind of change.
Yeah.
It's that two things are happening. One, we really want everyone to be focused on the work at hand. That's what we're here for. We don't need people working 80 hours a week. We want them to be working a focused 40.
Yeah.
And so a focused 40 means let's take all the noise out. And this is not part of the work we do.
Yeah.
So that's the first. And second, the last thing we would do is want you to find out something about your coworker, then all of a sudden you don't like her or him, and you liked them 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now because they view something just as passionately as you do, but on a different side of the spectrum, you don't like them, now you're not going to be able to productively work with them. We don't want that to happen either. So I think if you're going to take that stance, you have to clearly communicate
the reason
a why
that,
that is in the best interests of the actual employees. And say, again, we encourage you to do these things in off hours, but when you're here, we want us to be a team and focused.
So I thought it was interesting that so many employees were upset by this. Do you think employees should have a say in whether or not their company allows political discussions?
Nope.
No?
Not at all. I really don't think
All
so.
management?
Oh, well, whoever is cutting the checks makes the decision.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the decision maker pays. Oh, she just rolled her eyes, folks.
It's the worst.
This is someone who has heard this phrase many, many times. Many times.
So painful.
But it's true.
Yeah.
If I'm paying the bill, I don't want the plumber to dictate
how it's going.
Well, other than you're doing your plumbing, I've got some views I want to share with you today.
Yeah.
No, it's not what I'm paying you for, right? That's not what I'm paying you for.
Yeah.
Now, I do think employees can take a position and ask, but they don't get a vote. So taking a position, absolutely. And if they don't like what the company's policy is, find a company that does have a policy that fits your values. There are plenty out there. But I think the problem today is there's so much pressure for companies to somehow go a certain direction that we're not allowing for a spectrum of different kinds of work environments. There's lots of different kinds of work environments that can all be healthy, that fit different kinds of people. And I think that's a good thing. So if you find an environment that matches your values, and then you're going to be with your peeps, and it's going to be easier.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, you look like you have something to say.
No, I'm just laughing at the fact you said be with your peeps.
Is that something that maybe not a zillennial wouldn't say that?
A zillennial might not say that.
Would not say that?
But it's okay.
Well, Gen Xers say that. We also get very edgy when
Don't I know it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so what any parting thoughts you have on this discussion? What's your thoughts?
I agree. I think, like I said, my initial reaction was that's a dumb rule, because there's so many other things they could be focusing on besides this. But I also think if it's I think if it's going to help them make money at the end of the day, like that's what the company is for. If this is a big issue with company culture, if this is hurting productivity, if this is not allowing Basecamp to reach its full potential, they need to make this call. I think it was a bold call to make and a good one.
Yeah.
If it'll help. I'd kind of be interested to kind of see in the future years if they have more success than they have in the past because of these rules. Like if these rules end up opening more doors for them or allowing them to reach goals that they weren't able to reach before.
Yeah.
Be interested to keep following and seeing.
Yeah. I think it's a good, you said something that made me think of one last final thing I'd want to say. So we're not talking about nonprofits here.
Yeah.
We're not talking about government.
No.
We're talking about companies.
Yeah.
Okay, so a company's job is to create
money.
a product or service that meets a need in the world, and they generate profit off that.
Exactly.
So they can be an ongoing concern.
Yeah.
That's the fundamental.
I spent my last final project comparing companies' income statements and which ones writing recommendations for which ones to invest in. That's what people are doing. And if this makes Basecamp a better company to invest in, if this makes Basecamp look better, that's what it's about.
Yep.
If they're not having political discussions,
Now to that end,
Yeah.
to that end, if part of the product or service you provide is focused on societal
Yes.
change.
Yes. Again,
Then
we establish
then
that's
this
different.
reestablishes this reaffirms your marketing position. This reaffirms your
Yes.
brand. It reaffirms
Yes.
your culture, and it's in line with your
Exactly.
your overall goal.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing. People get confused and they start to think of this as like a government, like they have a vote in, and
Yeah.
then the government can come in and take care of them. And it's a company. It's a
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
It's not a government, and they're different animals.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Abby.
That's it.
Thank you. I think that's it. So I appreciate the Zillennial perspective today.
Love the way we ended on like a very edgy note.
I
Like a very
know. Got a little ranty. I think it's just being around you that gets me ranty.
Must be.
It's the energy.
Probably.
It's the energy. Is your room clean, by the way?
No. It's horrible.
It's not clean, is it?
I'm so sorry, guys.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if your room's clean, we might have to do this again this summer, a time or two.
I would love to be back.
Yeah. And thank you all for listening. I hope you found it at least somewhat entertaining, but maybe even a different perspective for how you think about this. And maybe I irritated you, and that reaffirmed your position, or you saw a different position differently. But the whole goal of this discussion was just for us to take something a little messy and see if we can add a little more substance to it. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to the next show.
Thanks so much for listening to the Workplace Therapist Show. And for all of you who've taken a minute or two to write a review of our show, thank you so much. It helps us grow our tribe and our listening audience. We're on a mission here to make this workplace and the world a better place, and we need your help in doing it. If you'll just take a few minutes to share your thoughts about the show, it'll really help us out. So go to iTunes or wherever you listen and write a few comments. I'm going to share one today from ALELO, who writes, Brandon examines great subjects with even better observations and guests. He's got a comfortable style that makes it for easy listening and easy learning. He's an important contributor to today's workplace dialogue. Thank you so much for such a positive review. And thank you all. Please take a moment or two and let's make this a better place.